What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Tony, and today we are taking a journey, if you will, back to my childhood as always. We're going to go straight to the year 1994, where a badass film starring Edward Furlong and Frank Langella took place, or however say his name. I'm, of course, talking about Brainscan, the movie that highlighted America's then obsession with VR gaming, CD-ROM as well, and it's not like how it is now. It's a very different time back then versus the obsession now, especially with video games. But this little film was released in theaters on April 22nd of 1994 with a script by Brian Owens and Andrew Kevin Walker. And it was, of course, directed by John Flynn with a budget of $5 million and receiving in $4.38 million in domestic return. This film, it failed to impress anyone at the time. But just like any other cult classic film, this one grew a following. And while I admit it is cheaply made, it's packed with 90s aesthetics and throwback garage bands on deck, dude. It is totally worth adding to your library. This movie dropped a little bit after Furlong hit major fame with T2. So as you can imagine, this was expected to make waves. And while it failed to do what they wanted, I would argue that this is as good as Furlong really gets. I am a diehard Eddie Furlong fan, and I love pretty much all of his work. But man, this is just peak Furlong in my opinion. I remember growing up and wanting to have the same lifestyle as this kid, dude. Just from the movies, such as, Brainscan, obviously. The career of Furlong's, it's been rocky for sure, and it hasn't necessarily stood the test of time. But this is one of my personal favorites, and I can't ignore the man's rough path to enjoy this one, honestly. In a way, it's a reminder of a time when Furlong was once a young kid with a bright future. But let's set the stage. Brainscan is a film about teenager Michael Brower, who lives in a state of isolation after a car accident that took the life of his mother and gave him a leg injury of sorts. With his father, who's constantly on the go with his job, there's no time for Brower, and Michael spends his days in the attic of his home, which he has decked out to be a 90s teen haven. Side note, by the way, this was a common theme in the 90s. If you had an attic or a loft, it was most likely going to be turned into the ultimate teenage jam pad. Brower also spends his time invested, though, in cheesy horror films as well as video games, and has quite the taste in the best headbanging music around, dude. Don't believe me? Oh my god, dude. This film is loaded with tracks from White Zombie, Primus, Pitch Shifter, Mudhoney. Dude, the list goes on. But anyway, Brower's friend Kyle introduces him to Fangoria ad that has the latest in horror gaming, Brainscan. A video game that puts you in the spotlight as a psychotic killer. And the best part about this video game is the host, known only as Trickster, played by T. Ryder Smith, who warns Brower of the dangers ahead. Brower, being the stubborn teen that he is, right? He ignores all fucking warning signs and throws himself in the video game's first mission. But when he wakes up, that's when he's shocked to learn that the murders that took place during the first mission have happened in real life. And now the fun begins. I won't spoil this one in any way, but I will just throw out there that the cop character basically plays a fill-in character who is your average older cop on TV, back in those days anyway. And the chick, Amy, I believe is her name, who plays the interest, the love interest character, Kimberly, who Brower also spends his days watching from his bedroom, because that's normal, and just wishing that she was his girl. Hey, we've all been there. I can talk shit. Both actors do decent here with what they have, but we'll get into that in a minute. I will do my best to not spoil this film as much as possible, but I have to open some boxes in order to discuss this film's strengths and weaknesses. It has both. I'll start with positives. And there's definitely plenty for a film that truly is your average mediocre 90s film. The first big positive, of course, is the story. There's some holes, but, with there being so many problems, I gotta admit the story is what really drew me in. I saw this film for the first time in middle school. I think I was in 8th grade. So the story was very relevant. And I love the way this film is put together, story-wise. It is your typical rebellious teenager taking on the unknown evils in the very entertainment that he consumes. But with the video game aspect, this isn't your average serial killer slasher movie, very apparent, and it is different for its time especially. And I like how the story is used to show the correlation of absent parent equals doom-chasing teenager, or how feeling lonely can be comforted by the unknown to this world. Now, while this is a horror film, yes, it's very comedic. This feels like the type of film that takes real life issues and traumas and turns them into just straight comedy. It is almost like the laughs come from dark topic things and, the things you wouldn't normally find heartwarming. There we go. For whatever reason, the story feels familiar, but you can't help but stick around, especially when Trickster is around. Those are the best parts, in my opinion. Trickster is just another positive. There is plenty of behind the scenes drama when it came to pretty much the aspects of this character and like what went into making this movie, specifically this character. And one of them was the original creation of Trickster. I mean, I guess they were going to eventually turn him into like a grotesque monster. That was the idea because the designs they had seemed way too real. So the directors went with what you saw on screen. And this version would prove to be more of a character rather than a monster. And he's the heart of the film. Trickster is a character that you can only describe as like cool and hip and gross and disturbing, even for how tame his character is in the final cut. He's like an undead and cool as fuck Alice Cooper, but with like a knack for dark comedy. And at the right time, the delivery is great. This character is like practically who carries the film alongside Furlong. And I would argue that when these two are on screen, that's when the movie's magic really happens. That's when it shines the most. And I gotta say that is a positive for me. Furlong's performance. A lot of folks love to hate. Even back then, director Flynn very much was specific about the fact that he wasn't the biggest fan of Furlong's acting skills, for lack thereof, but I say he's misunderstood. Anytime Furlong is on screen in any movie back in those days, he's the quintessential bad boy teen who's like too cool for the crowds, and it shows. In this film, he's more reserved, but man, he still rocks like that 90s lover boy haircut, as well as the attitude he carries in other films such as like Pet Sematary 2. Another good one. Furlong's ability to go one-on-one with Trickster is impressive because it just feels right. These two steal the scene every time, and it looks like it was a match made in heaven with how they feed off of each other. I understand where people have their issues with Furlong, but if there was a film that perfectly represents his limited skill set that I've mentioned, it is definitely this movie. The score to this movie is a positive for me as well. For most, it is just another like 90s movie with another terribly made, eerie 90s score. But for me, it is what sets the tone of the film. Every time something seems off, or even when Brower is lost, looking out his window at the girl across the street, the music hits in like a dream sense. There are even a few dream sequences where this really proves my point. There's just something about the way that the music plays out and flows in this film. It's that constant same tune that makes the film feel soft and slow, even when horror is lurking around the corner. Plus, the soundtrack. Did I already mention the soundtrack? All right. On to the next point. Another positive is the dynamic of Furlong and actor Jamie Marsh, who plays Kyle, Brower's bro, if you will. Their on-screen work is also like, it's so believable that these characters make you feel like they really are best friends. And I don't know much about behind the scenes with that aspect, but for what little screen time they do have, it's amazing. But the acting from both feels so fresh, and that's why it's organic. It takes you back to the days of your childhood. You know that one friend you made when you were like, I don't know, 12 that you will just never forget even to this day? Yeah, that's the best way to describe these two. It really hits home. And the humor from Marsh is very fitting. He's like that comedic relief that's just needed whenever Furlong is busy being a lonesome teen. It is so needed. But my final positive pretty much goes hand in hand with the film style that I had mentioned. From 90s like headbanging bands to video game and movie posters all over, all throughout the fucking background, this movie is like a literal time capsule. And it does well at managing certain themes that it tackles. I love how this movie highlights the troubles of being a lonely teenager, but it doesn't spend so much time dwelling on it. Rather, it shows like the forms of entertainment that we naturally run to for comfort when dealing with those types of loss, especially the loss of a mom. It is much better than seeing him do drugs and party then fall apart so horribly like most movies these days. Maybe I sound like I am downplaying life's harsh realities, but I love how this film takes the dark tones and carefully examines them while having fun at the same time. The visuals may not be for the Marvel eyes, but man, this is rich history. If you're one of those kids that likes 80s and 90s filters, then you're going to die over this movie. The cinematography is, yeah, it's low budget and mediocre for its time, but I think it is what ended up making this film stand out and stand the test of time. This is your guys' movie if you like them filters. I remember seeing this movie and falling in love with the visuals, especially the scenes that involve the opening of the video game where we get to see a glowing-eyed trickster on screen for the first time. But that's all for now. Now we got to get into the negatives. So one of the biggest problems with this film is how cardboard the secondary characters are. As much as I love them, you can tell they do that in favor of Brower's background. You can see that they spent more time giving you a lot of Brower and his story, that these other characters are just like fill-in. In fact, you can almost argue that they serve little to no purpose, sadly. The detective ends up having a point, I guess, towards the end, but not really. I mean, same goes for the Kimberly character. She only exists for this kid to fantasize about banging in his bedroom. Yeah, she plays, a role here that's supposed to serve the story, but it doesn't really matter. And without spoiling too much, Kyle is also disposable. By that, I mean, he exists just to make the film take a pivotal role. So he's useful, but you could use any person for what they used him for. These are background characters. They're truly just that. And I enjoyed the effort they each gave, but the characters are useless. As much as I liked them, they're just useless. Even Trickster has little to no point, no background. But that makes sense for his character. I went into this film as an 8th grader expecting lots of slashing and bloody gore, but that is not what this movie is about. And over time, I've accepted that. But there's very little blood. There's maybe 1 or 2 kill scenes that go all out, sorta, but even then, it's very tame. This is a very tame movie when it comes to the blood. The idea of the video game that Brower plays is to be like an over-the-top psychopath, but it is hard to find that believable when the carnage is just lacking. When you have a film that it lacks the blood, it lacks explanation for these secondary characters, it is hard to care. It really is. But my final negative is small. The ending is stupid. Not the way the film ends, but the way the game ends, dude. You'll know when you see it. But without going into too much spoiler territory, the ending of the video game that Brower is playing is just so it's cliffhanger, but it's also rushed. It's confusing. You can tell that aspect was not thought over well. When it all comes together, you're left kind of wondering if they truly had any fucking clue as to where this was going. But in the end, you still end up having a blast. And I did end up loving the film's ending. It has a fun little joke, and it leaves you smiling. It's like a little ha ha ha. This movie has something for everyone. Believe it or not, it has it. And if it's not the nostalgia that doesn't get you, the corny line deliveries will. And if that's not enough, dude, the soundtrack, again, it will get you. But most importantly, the humor in this will get you because it's delivered in a smart way, especially for how dark the tone is. The topics, I mean. The best way to describe the experience of this movie, though, is fun, like I've been saying, and it's an absolute blast. Again, if you are one of them weird Gen Z kids that has an obsession with the uniqueness of the 90s, this is your movie. I promise you that you will thank me later. It is not just a product of its time, but it's a masterpiece in the department of forgotten films. I'm going to rank this one as a worth checking out on streaming, which is 3 stars in my book. I'm trying not to be biased here, but I love this movie personally, and I honestly recommend owning a copy of it. This should be on your DVD or Blu-ray library, dude. It's an awesome movie, but I can't be biased. I got to be honest. It's very much a 3-star film. If you're someone that, if you like Idle Hands, there we go. You're going to like this movie. It's not as funny as Idle Hands. Idle Hands is a straight up comedy. You can tell that Brainscan, they didn't necessarily try to make it a comedy, but they did so well by making it a comedy in a sense. They take these dark tones and these dark topics and they make them funny in a sense. So it really worked. This is one of those movies that if you are a midnight toker, perfect. If you're you like a few brews with a movie, perfect. And if you like to be sober and watch movies like most people, even better. Brainscan from 1994. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Comment below, let me know. Please make sure to hit that follow and subscribe button. And always remember, folks, to stay rad.